Time now for our Entre Nous segment, and today is March 11th, and it's National Reading Day here in France, with schools across the country pushing children to read for at least 15 minutes every single day. However, certain trends have started to cause some concern. And to talk more about this, we'll be speaking to Elizabeth Milovidov, founder of Digital Parenting Coach, as well as Solange Mougin. Solange, let me start with you first. Is France really a nation of readers?
Yeah, France indeed has one of the highest levels of readers in Europe, with 3 out of 4 French people, or some 40 million people over the age of 15, having read at least one book in 2024. This is according to the National Union of Publishers. However, there is some concern that young people in particular are reading less, and there's also concern about what some of them are reading, certain literary trends such as dark romance going viral, particularly among young girls. We will get to that in a minute, but first, when it comes to reading, where are children at? Well, the National Center of Books created this day with the l'Éducation nationale, or the Education Department, to promote the habit of reading for at least 15 minutes a day. For they found that young French kids spend 10 times more time per day on screens than on reading for fun. On average, kids spend 3 hours and 11 minutes on screens versus 19 minutes spent reading for pleasure. Now, the questionnaire excluded school time reading, and also took into account for reading and listening to a book on a tablet. That's counted as reading. So French children are generally reading less than they are watching. But among those that are reading, what are they reading, and should adults be concerned about what they're reading? Well, graphic novels and bande dessinée, or mangas, Japanese graphic novels, they are huge here in France, and that warrants an entire segment in itself. But today I wanted to concentrate on the rising trend among teens, particularly teen girls, that is creating some concern among educators and parents, and that is dark romance.
Now, Solange, this trend of dark romance emerged in part due to how young teens are getting into reading.
Yeah, to break this down, I need to explain the phenomenon of book talk and new romance, and then we can get to one of its offshoots, dark romance. So if you do not know what book talk is, T-O-K, not T-A-L-K, book talk, it is a community and a hashtag on TikTok where you have young book reviewers critiquing and praising books with sort of short, snappy videos. Altogether, there are around 60 billion videos that have collectively around 200 billion views, so this is quite huge. It has created a space where otherwise unknown authors can suddenly go viral and sell hundreds of thousands of copies, even millions, if you take, for example, Colleen Hoover or Rebecca Yarros. But publishers have, and in addition to this, publishers have caught on, with many now hiring young TikTokers to review books. It's revolutionizing the industry. And one genre where book talk really has made major headway is romance. Now, romance has always had a lucrative and widespread following, but there's been a big change in the genre from the older generation, say Harlequin or Mills and Boon's novels with bare-chested swashbucklers saving damsels in distress. Now, these are love stories where the women are often not submissive, they have agency. These new romances also are a genre where there are often explicit sex scenes. There's a ton of sub-genres to romance, but there is one major rule to all of them, which is that there has to be a happily ever after ending, or an HEA in the fan lingo. And most new romance fans, well, they are young women that read a lot of these books. In France, the numbers actually doubled in 2023, with 6 million romance novels sold. It is so lucrative that many editors say that it's helping save the industry. The site Babelio, they polled 7,000 readers, and 95% of the romance readers were women. Over half read more than 2 romances per month. And of those readers, 40% of them, this is important, are from 15 to 24-year-olds, with most of them having started to read romance as young teens. And that's where we can potentially run into issues with dark romance.
So, Solange, what exactly is this dark romance?
Well, it is one of the many subgenres of romance novels. There are lots of them, from paranormal to historical to gothic to sports romances. But with dark romance, there is, in addition to the happily ever after, there are portrayals or romanticizations of abuse, be it psychological or physical torture, rape, kidnapping, manipulation, domination. In a nutshell, a rough outline of many of these books is abuse abusive bad boy main character does essentially toxic and potentially illegal in real life things to an often meek and submissive girl. Think 50 Shades of Grey, which was seen as a precursor to the genre, or the million-plus bestseller by Colleen Hoover, It Ends With Us. There's debate about whether or not that is dark romance or not. Now, you could argue all of this is fine. It is fiction, and readers are able to distinguish between escapist fiction and real life. For example, crime novel fans, they don't suddenly become serial killers. That's one argument. But if you take into account the number of young people that are reading these books, thanks to sites like Book Talk, again, 70% of Book Talk and TikTok users, rather, are under 24, it raises the question of very young readers and their access to these books. It also raises the question, like pornography does, of what does this viral subgenre do to the minds of young people that may not necessarily have the tools yet to read them critically? And then how does this affect their views of relationships, of society? Should such glorifications of toxic relationships and abuse be kept from young eyes? Should there be a warning system or laws like there is, for example, with child pornography or racism? Does this, though, infringe on free speech? That's a counter-argument. These are not easy questions, but there is a need, at least for parents, to be aware that there is a trend among some young girls who are reading potentially some very dark stuff.
It seems like it. Solange, thank you very much for that. We can now bring in Elizabeth Milovidov, founder at Digital Parenting Coach. Elizabeth, good to see you again on the program. Tell us, what exactly happens when teens search for dark romance online?
Right. So this is where it gets tricky. As Solange really laid out for us, this whole genre of dark romance and what's happening, the fact that we add this online element to it, it can be really problematic. Teens can search for this dark romance online, so they can encounter a mix of content, some harmless, some really, really problematic, and some just outright harmful. What you're seeing on your screen, that was just me going on Instagram and taking a look at dark romance. And you could see how all of that was just glorifying these harmful relationships. And when you're looking at dark romance online, I mean, depending on what platform you are on, you're going to have different issues. So, for example, with Book Talk and Bookstagram, you're going to see things that are glorifying these harmful relationships, as Solange really, really explained about this sort of violent, aggressive male character. If you go to Pinterest or Tumblr, which are more images, you will see this sort of romanticized version of dangerous love. And Reddit and Discord, which are really sort of platforms for having online discussions, then you're going to see more and more discussions. Our younger teens are going to be listening to this type of content and having desensitized discussions. I mean, this is something of what we've seen with some of the misogynist influencers as well, where the more and more there's conversations about this, the boys, in case of the misogyny, they become desensitized and they think it's okay to treat girls and women this way. And the flip side here is that as girls and young women are having these same sort of conversations, they feel it's okay to be treated this way. We don't even think about music, right? But music, if you're searching online, music can also glamorize some of this stalking, this destructive behavior, this sort of control, this self-destructive relationship. And Delano, before you even ask, I'm going to tell you a perfect example for music is Every Breath You Take by Police, right? The Police, that was kind of cringy way back when, and there are some questions now. But if we also look at other platforms, if your teens are playing on some of the role play platforms, they can, reenact some of these intense scenes. We've seen that in some of the more recent metaverse experiences. And I think last thing for parents to realize is that when you're, again, in this online world, there are just a chat room, a forum discussion away where there are predators, groomers waiting to exploit your teens' curiosity.
So, Elizabeth, what can parents do if they want to warn their teens about this exact type of content without then increasing their curiosity for exactly that?
Yeah, I feel that you really need to start speaking about what the algorithm is and what can happen when you're online. And this is the same sort of conversations that we have when we're talking to our children about, just being online for too long. So you explain how the algorithm can, amplify the content that you're seeing, that toxic, harmful content. You will start to see more of it. We know that there are little bubbles. I mean, we've seen this with misinformation and sort of political discussions where there's really a narrow perspective. So the same thing is happening in relationships. Unfortunately, algorithms are created to escalate more, to give you more of what you're looking for. And sometimes this can be that harmful content that then progresses to another level. And I think, quite frankly, we are all in agreement that algorithms are designed to keep your attention. That is what they were created for. And I think that you need to have these types of conversations with your young people to talk about this sort of addictive design that lead to problematic use. And I think overall to realize that this algorithm, it can really influence how you define relationships. And again, the example that I want to use is for the girls and the boys is look at the misogynistic content that's out there and compare that with the dark romance content that's there.
Elizabeth, very briefly, is it even possible to read this type of content safely?
Well, in my house, I'm going to say yes,
Okay.
because I'm with my children, and I have read a couple of these books. But I do think that it's critical thinking, right? It's always going to be the same thing. It is making sure that people understand what is fiction, what is reality, right? And when you're having these conversations, which are always the core the pillar for digital parenting, you're going to have a neutral conversation. You are not going to just come out, guns blazing, banning all the books, because all that's going to do is have your child going to the neighbors, going to the library, going online somewhere else. So you have to have a conversation, not a warning. You have to explain about, what is happening, what the algorithm is doing to you, what psychology, how it is shaping our perceptions, the world that we see around us. And really, I think a really great and simple tip is to just, again, that conversation, but ask them about their favorite characters. Why do they like that guy, so much in that dark suit? What's going on there? What about this woman? How is she such a strong character? You can find alternatives and help them understand. I think that teens, we forget that if you explain something to them, they will get it. Help them recognize some of those red flags. They will know. They will know if you keep talking about what's toxic and what's not.
Elizabeth and Solange, thank you so much for joining us here on Entre Nous.